Here we are looking at Canadian bisects, various examples. So this is a follow-up to the earlier presentation. And why there are bisects? Well, the interesting feature about covers and pieces is that whatever the year, most, if not all, are postmarked late October and November. I'm convinced the real culprit was the postmaster himself, because there was a pre-Christmas rush from commercial houses sending out sales flyers, which required 1 cent, and he wasn't sure of getting replacement stock soon enough. Or he liked playing games of the regulations. 1 cent paid drop letter rates, meaning you went into the post office and they never went out of that post office. And so no official, another would say. So this was John Hilson's suggestion as to why we even had bisects. Why not bisects? Well, the Deputy Postmaster General Griffin said in 1860, I beg to say that the moiety, meaning 1/2, of a 10-cent stamp cannot be accepted in payment of a 5-cent rate. If such a practice were permitted, it would frequently happen that half of an already used 10-cent stamp would be found to be sufficiently free from any impress of a canceling stamp to be used again. So that's why they said you can't do it, because people may be able to reuse, cut them in half and reuse them. Here's an example of examples of a diagonal paying a 3-cent rate. Obviously, the postmaster didn't have 3-cent stamps and had 2s, so they used a bisect. Not very often do you see the bisects in a pair. Here's a bisect. Again, now we're coming back to this. This has also got an indicia error. It should be November 27th instead of on 27, but this is on an OHMS envelope. Right there, the indicia error. And it's Halifax. It is the end of the year. Here's another Halifax at the end of the year, December 3rd. And another Halifax duplex.
I don't think indicia is the right word there. I think that's a postmark, right? Indicium refers to the imprint of a postage-like, a stamp-like impression on a piece of postal stationery. That's what we call an indicium.
When these are the indicia, they're in the hub. This is called the hub. And if the dates are wrong or the indicia error, that's a terminology issue.
Well, maybe the Canadian terminology is different.
Yeah. I'll have to check the definitions. Here's another example of not just, there's the 2 obvious bisects here, but there's actually 4 of them. 2 there, 1 there, 1 there, and 4. There's 2 more here in the middle. He's actually taken this 1/2-cent stamp and cut it in half and made them all into quarters of a cent. But the 2 halves make up 1 cent and the 4 quarters make up another cent. So it's a 2-cent rate. In Montreal at this time, it would have been a 2 cent for a drop letter rate, 3 cent for domestic, but a 2 cent for a drop letter rate. And obviously it's philatelic. Here's another bisect. This was obviously the commercial mail, and they were trying to get away with paying a 3-cent rate, and all they had was 2-cent stamps. And Canada Post then said, no, underline this, postage due. And as in the US, the postage due is always what's called double the deficiency. And this was 1 cent deficient, because that's not considered 1 cent, so you had to pay 2-cent postage due. This is an interesting one. Here we're looking at 3 cents. He's 3 cents is the UPU rate, but there was a deficiency. It says, it was the 3-cent Empire letter rate. Sorry. So he did pay the correct postage amount, but somebody in Canada Post felt it was 10 cents due. I think they.
Arnie, do you know who stamped the 10-cent due?
I can only imagine Canadian. And they presumed they hadn't considered the Empire rate, where the normal rate, international rate, would have been 5 cents. And the regulations do say that if there's any postage due on it, any mutilated stamps on it, you have to pay the full mark. The 10-cent due would have been double the 5-cent international mail rate, not the Empire rate. In Canada, you shouldn't have gotten credit for the 2 1-cent stamps that were good. You should pay the entire, it would have been a 6-cent postage due if you had done it right. The Brits considered it only 1 cent deficiency. So which is the correct thing. And therefore they charged 1 penny as the postage due, because 1 penny is equal to 2 cents in the conversions of for postage due purposes and currencies. So, but it also says at the bottom PTO, a Brantford duplex, and since I live in Brantford, it's of course interesting. Monday, here's what it says. Monday, the postman used quite strong language concerning the stamps. You had better not do it again. Also be careful, les femmes, regards to your mother. So a little bit of a personal note on the back. Here's a bisect. Well, this is a regular, sorry. We had special delivery rates from 1898 at 10 cents. And for that, we had stamp issued number E1. 22 went up to 20 cents, and those are the stamps we had issued with 20 cents. But March 1st of 39, that dropped back to 10 cents. So E9 was issued, the 10 cent on 20 cent. It was valid for 1 month only, for the month of March 1st or March 31st or April 1st, the new stamp came in. So that this particular E9 was issued and was only good for 1 month. That 1 month rate. On April 1st, E10, the 10 cent E7 was issued. And this was on March 9th, 29th. So this was still within the 1 month period. So this is a properly used 10 cent overprint E9. Here we see the same, well, not an E9, but we see the E8. Presumably, the postmaster had run out of the 10 cent E9s, 10 cent overprint on E8, or was playing games and decided to use up his old stock because he wasn't going to use these anymore. So he used this old stamp without the overprint, bisected it, and paid the special delivery rate within that 1 month period. Yes, it's an unusual, and apparently if postmasters do bisects, according to the regulations, it's allowed. Here's the back, red deer. This is a royal visit bisect, or no, royal visit stamp. And in this case, in Halifax, we're looking at Annapolis Royal. It was canceled in Annapolis Royal and addressed to what was expected to be a local delivery. But actually, this person lived across the river, 2 kilometers away. So the sender assumed the local 2 cent rate and addressed it to Annapolis Royal, but the address he lived across the river in Granville, and that wasn't local, even though it was only 2 kilometers away. So therefore, 1 cent tax was due. Now the postage due for this kind of a forwarding error, because it was not a postage error, he provided the correct postage for the local rate, because it was actually forwarding. And on the rules on postage due for forwarding, you don't have to pay double the deficiency. So the postmaster put on a 2 cent and cut it in half, making equivalent to 1 cent tax charge. And it was canceled in Granville Valley the next day. Here we have an 8 cent farm scene caught and 6 cents due because the 3 cents was the correct postage due. And so you can't do that. Basically, it was local delivery, should have been only 3 cents, but that's why 6 cents postage due. Here's 2 more bisects. These are inkjet cancels. These are philatelic. Well, I made them because we had a new price increase on January 16th. The price jumped from 50 to 51 cents, but the post office had run out of 1 cent cents. They had none. So I took a 2 cent and mailed 2 letters off to my daughter and my son. And so that's a bisect being used because the post office had run out of stamps. And that's it.